have gaming visuals plateaued? I think that's something that is becoming more and more relevant now, especially with some of the recent hardware that was introduced with the PlayStation 5 Pro and sort of the reaction that I've noticed online to this. And it's not from everyone, as there are people who are excited for new hardware, new systems, and the PlayStation 5 Pro does at least offer something for the enthusiast crowd, people with like the high-end TVs and everything else surrounding it, and the push for better visuals. I get that, right? But typically when we see announcements for something like the PS4 Pro or the Xbox One X, there was a bit more excitement then versus now with the PS5 Pro, and maybe that's pricing, but either way, I have noticed that maybe that push for the next big visual showcase is not as strong as it once previously was. So when I start to see this brought up more and more, as for example we're going to get into here, it does make me wonder what the next step is or what the pivot will be for some of these platform holders going forward. So if you guys enjoy the video, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new. Now, this is something that popped up and I saw, and I kind of laughed myself a little bit because we've talked about this at length, I feel like, on many different podcasts that I've been on. The idea of the gaming visuals with the diminishing returns really just not having that wow factor anymore. And when asked here, this was in that recent interview at a convention that Shawn Layden had attended, he talked about many different things, which included some of the creativity being lost in the gaming space and the AA sector kind of evaporating. But he was asked about the future console hardware, and Layden said he believed that a power boost on its own would not appeal to the majority of gamers, going on to say it has plateaued. We're at the stage of hardware development that I call only dogs can hear the difference. If you're playing your game and sunlight is coming through your window onto your TV, you're not seeing any ray tracing. It has to be super optimal. You have to have an 8K monitor and a dark room to see these things. I will say I don't think you need to have an 8K monitor necessarily. I do think you have to have the right circumstances, in, as he's saying here, in the sense of sunlight coming through. If you've played it in a room and like even if you have the blinds down and just enough peeks through and hits your OLED screen, it's fighting for its life at that point when it comes to image quality. It just is. So yes, in that sense, you do need to have the right dark environment to get the most out of your nice OLED or theater setup, sure. But in this case, the idea of ray tracing it's been around for years now. It's been pushed heavily by mostly graphics card manufacturers because I think it's a way for them to try to justify the rising costs, which the video card market is a whole other thing. It's very different now versus even 10 years ago. And I'm thinking back to the days of like the budget cards we would get that were, I think, more interesting than the high-end cards because you knew what you were getting into if you spent enough money. I was just always intrigued to see what $200 brand new could get you for a card, and at the time it was actually quite impressive. I'm thinking of like the RX 480. That was a pretty good card at the time when it released. But even before that, we had many different cards for Nvidia before they pushed in this direction where it almost feels like they have features that they're specifically locking to newer video cards just to try to get you to upgrade to it. That's it. It's not like the card, it has this big wow factor to it outside of them having like a software lock almost over different features. Nonetheless, ray tracing has, of course, found its way into these different consoles, and that has also been part of the marketing. However, it just hasn't really lived up to the hype that they were trying to outline to us, and most of the time for me, it gets turned off because I'll do performance mode. I just prefer to have the higher frame rate or the 60 FPS or the smoother frame rate over what ray tracing offers. Now, he goes on to say we're fighting over teraflops, and that's no place to be. We need to compete on content, jacking up the specs of the box. I think we've reached the ceiling. Now, part of that also comes back to there is a cost for this. So any of these manufacturers, Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, they could make an incredible box that would be really powerful. And even in Nintendo's case, a very powerful handheld. They could do all of this, but there is a cost. So, for example, with Nintendo, you might have a cost for battery life, as well as literally how much it costs, like the system itself. There's always a threshold they're trying to work within for their mainstream quote unquote console. With Sony offering their PS5 Pro, that is not their main PS5 system they're selling. Their main one is just the standard, the $450 digital, the $500 disc-based unit, and now refurbished systems that start at $350. This is an enthusiast, low manufactured number that they're releasing here with the PS5 Pro. They're not looking to make a ton of them necessarily compared to the base one, all right? So they could easily make $1,000+ system that would probably do everything, 4K, 60 FPS ray tracing, whatever, maybe even more than that. But it wouldn't make sense on their end because it would get to the point where it's like, okay, now people are really weighing the cost to benefit ratio. And 700, I think for a lot of people looking at it was already pushing it. Okay, now you get to 1200. It's like, I think I'm good. And then other places of the world, almost $2,000. It's like, I'll stick with my current PS5. That's okay. So that does make you think where else they can go that makes the next generation feel like a leap. I mean, even Layden even says here, the race is nearly over and you know who won? AMD. They sure did, because they used both Sony and Microsoft to sell a ton of their chips. But when I saw this, I did think about something else in the gaming space, specifically with the demographic, the people who are playing video games now, and sort of their age, I guess. Because something I've noticed is that the average gamer technically is getting older, and it's like I think 10 years ago or something, we had like all these surveys are gonna be obviously different sources, different number of people that they survey and stuff, but we have seen the average age of gamers go up. Like for every couple of years, it's an extra year. And I think we're up to now, if I go over, we have Play Today. It was as July 2024, saying the average video game player in the US is now 35. So that it's a significant shift, as they mentioned here, from a decade ago. I think it's by about 5 years. It was like 30 or 31 a decade ago, and now we're up to 35. And something they pointed out here in this article, outside of just, oh, you're getting old, so your reflexes are worse now, but no obsession with ultra-realistic graphics. And I really had to stop and think about that for a minute, because I will admit I am getting away from, I guess, how it used to be, where I would see the jump in visuals and be like, this is incredible. I want more of this. Because I just feel like as we see these games come out, like they could look better, but how much better? Because we already have those games that come out that sort of set the bar high. So Last of Us Part 2 is an incredible looking game. Like all the way around, the animation, the attention to detail. You look at something like Cyberpunk, most recently Hellblade 2, and you do start to go, okay, how much better is a game going to look 5 or 10 years from now versus this? And even if they got the hair a little more realistic, they show more pores on the skin, the rocks around you on the landscape are shinier, is it going to be that much better compared to when the PS1 we jumped to the PS2? I mean, Final Fantasy IX versus Final Fantasy X is insane. That is such a massive jump to, yes, there was an obsession for visuals then, because we could notice it. It was so clear right in front of us how much better they were. Look at something like the original Metal Gear Solid, that was on the PS1. Then look at Twin Snakes on the GameCube, and it's just incredible. Like the kind of leaps we were seeing then versus now. You have the same games on PS4 and PS5, and sure, Horizon Forbidden West looks better on the PS5. God of War Ragnarok looks better on the PS5, but it doesn't look terrible on the PS4. So that's kind of the situation now. It's like, I mean, I guess it's kind of that thought of I'll upgrade at some point, but the visuals aren't really what's pushing me towards it. Now with the PS5, we do also have, of course, SSD. There is a lot of convenience with that because you eliminate most, if not all, load times for some of these games. So I get that, but really going to something like the PlayStation 6 or Microsoft's next system, I don't know what the avenue is if they go, okay, now this is just a more powerful system. Because we see the PS5 Pro coming, it's more powerful, but it's not really pushing the needle for most people. And yes, some of that has to do with the price tag, but also it is kind of, we're seeing these comparisons. People are like, I mean, maybe? How far do we have to zoom in for me to see the difference here? And it's going to look better in person than what we see through streaming or just video compression and stuff on YouTube. I get it. But when you have to get really close to the screen and start pointing it out, it's just not like what we had before, where gamers who have gotten older now saw these kind of visual leaps. It's just not the driving force. It's not the selling point anymore. So that's my curiosity now is, what is the jump? What would make you want to go to the PS6 or the PS7, we'll say, decade from now or something? What will be the thing? Will it be just more features around the game? Will it be more immersive things with the controller? Or maybe there is some kind of breakthrough for the game itself that's only possible in this new hardware? And I think that's the biggest part, is getting back to the games themselves feeling like the revolution, as opposed to the hardware doing most of the heavy lifting. But that's kind of my thought on it now. But it was an interesting thing seeing brought up here with Shawn Layden, and then linking it to that gamers getting older and not necessarily caring as much with the ultra realistic visuals or the leaps from generation to generation versus what we had when we were in our teens and the whole world was in front of us. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.